The next time you wrinkle your nose at spoiled food, remember this. Your ancestors might have called it dinner. Not in some rare moment of total desperation, but as part of a normal human menu built in cold caves, open grasslands, smoky camps, and shorelines where survival often depended on eating the parts of the world that looked, smelled, and felt the most wrong. That sounds impossible now. Why would any human choose food that seems disgusting? Because disgust is not a law of nature, it is a survival filter. And like every survival filter in your brain, it was shaped by the strange fact that the foods which kept humans alive were not always the clean, fresh, boneless things stacked under bright supermarket lights. Sometimes they were crawling, sometimes they were rotten, sometimes they were hidden inside bones, skin, stomach, shell, or mud. Sometimes they smelled like death, and sometimes they gave your ancestors exactly what they needed. So what did ancient people actually eat? Start with the thing that sounds least civilized: insects. Not as a stunt, not as a dare, as food. Long before recipes, farms, or metal tools, insects were one of the easiest packets of nutrition available to humans and human relatives. They were small, abundant, seasonal, and often rich in fat and protein in a world where both could be hard to get. They were slow enough to collect. They were easy to store. They often came in huge numbers. That matters. Would you rather chase one antelope for hours or pull handfuls of soft larvae from a log? Your brain may answer that question emotionally. Your ancestors answered it economically. If a rotting stump held hundreds of grubs, that stump was not disgusting. It was lunch, and maybe the most efficient lunch in the landscape. Modern disgust makes insects feel like famine food. Human history suggests something else. Across cultures, people have eaten termites, beetle larvae, grasshoppers, ants, and caterpillars, not because they had no standards, but because they had excellent standards for survival. The idea that bugs are beneath you is very new. The calories are not. Does that make them sound less gross? Maybe not. So move one step deeper: bone marrow. To you, a skeleton looks empty. To ancient humans, it could look sealed. Inside, long bones sat soft, fatty tissue protected by nature's own container, hidden from sun, insects, and bacteria far longer than exposed meat. That meant a carcass abandoned by lions or hyenas could still hold a rich reserve of calories after the obvious flesh was gone. This may have mattered enormously. Anthropologist Jessica Thompson has argued that early human ancestors may have gained a crucial energy advantage not from meat first, but from fat, especially marrow scavenged by smashing open bones with rocks. That changes the picture. It means one of the great foods that shaped your species may have looked like a leftover nobody else wanted. Can you feel how strange that is? You tend to imagine progress beginning with clean hunting, but it may have begun with scavenging, with waiting until the dangerous animals left, walking up to what remained, and breaking into the hard white cylinders scattered in the dirt because inside them was something dense, rich, and precious on a calorie-poor landscape. That is not glamorous. It is brilliant. John Speth, an anthropologist who spent years thinking about ancient diets, emphasized how important fat was to hunter-gatherers because lean meat alone is not enough. Too much lean protein without enough fat or carbohydrate can become a physiological problem rather than a gift. So the gross part was often the useful part, the greasy part, the slippery part, the part you now trim away. Why would evolution care about your preferences when it cared about your survival? Then there were organs: liver, kidneys, brains, stomach, eyes, intestines. These are the foods many modern people avoid first, yet in traditional hunting cultures they were often prized, distributed carefully, and eaten quickly because they delivered nutrients that muscle meat alone did not. Organs spoil fast. That is exactly why ancient people often ate them first. The smell could be intense, the texture could be worse, the nutritional payoff could be enormous. A modern eater sees mess. A hungry band of foragers saw timing. If the animal had just been killed, the most perishable parts had to be used before they turned. Nothing wasteful, nothing sentimental. Do you call that disgusting or disciplined? And then comes the part your stomach may resist. Rotting meat. Not every ancient human meal was fresh. It could not be. Before refrigeration, freshness was fleeting, and the line between aged, fermented, dried, smoked, preserved, and spoiled was far blurrier than your brain likes to admit. In cold climates especially, people learned that controlled decay could be transformed into storage. Strong smell did not automatically mean danger. Sometimes it meant microbes had done work that made food last longer or become easier to digest. That sounds unsettling. It should. You are listening with a refrigerator in your mind. What happens when that mental appliance disappears? Suddenly the world looks different. Fish left to ferment are no longer an outrage. They are winter insurance. Archaeologist Adam Boethius found evidence from Mesolithic southern Sweden suggesting that people were fermenting large amounts of fish more than 9,000 years ago. The process likely involved pine bark, seal fat, skins, pits, cold weather, and patience, which is a combination that sounds less like cuisine and more like a prank until you remember that preserved food can support larger populations and change the scale of human life. So yes, ancient people may have buried fish and waited for chemistry to do something foul. Then they ate it. Not because they were irrational, because they understood seasonality. Would you rather endure a bad smell in summer or starvation in winter? The same logic appears again and again. Fermentation can look like failure. Often it is planning. Milk turns sour, fruit foams, fish softens, grains transform. And what your senses first flag as danger can, under the right conditions, become preservation, extra flavor, safer storage, or easier digestion. This is one reason disgust is such a poor guide to history. It tells you what feels wrong now. It does not tell you what worked then. The ancient world rewarded flexibility. Your body still remembers that, even when your taste pretends otherwise. So what else did ancient humans swallow that you would rather not picture? Shellfish pulled from muck, snails, sea urchins, seaweed, partially digested plant matter from stomach contents, bitter roots that needed processing, charred scraps, chewed foods shared with children before bowls, blenders, or baby spoons existed. This is not the polished story of elegant ancestral purity that modern fantasy likes to sell. It is a story of contact, hands in mud, stones on bone, teeth in fiber, smoke in hair, grease on fingers. Does that make the past feel less noble? It should make it feel more real. Ancient diets were not clean because ancient life was not clean, and yet they were not random either. People learned, they watched animals, they watched seasons, they tested methods. They remembered which foods made people stronger, which made them sick, and which could be transformed by pounding, soaking, roasting, drying, or burying. Knowledge accumulated slowly, then it hardened into culture. A smell that made one outsider gag could signal safety to an insider because it matched a known process with a known result. The food was not just food, it was information. Can disgust survive when knowledge changes? Think about bitterness. Many wild plants are bitter. Some are harmless. Some are medicinal. Some are toxic unless processed. Your ancestors did not get a printed label. They got trial, memory, and community. Research by Amanda Henry and her colleagues found starch grains and other plant residues trapped in Neanderthal dental calculus, showing that Neanderthals and early modern humans ate a wider range of plant foods, including cooked foods, than the old meat-only stereotype suggested. That matters for a simple reason. It means ancient eating was already experimental, already skilled, already more imaginative than the cartoon version. Even the foods trapped between ancient teeth tell a story of technique. Are you really looking at primitive people or at people solving problems with brutal efficiency? Now add hunger, not movie hunger, not skipping lunch, real uncertainty. The kind where a successful foraging day is the difference between energy and weakness, warmth and cold, fertility and decline. In that world, disgust still exists, but it must negotiate with necessity, and necessity is a much harsher negotiator than comfort. This does not mean ancient people ate absolutely anything, far from it. Humans evolved disgust for good reasons. Rot can signal pathogens, bodily fluids can signal disease, unfamiliar animals can carry risk. But disgust is not a stop sign in every setting. It is a probability detector, and culture teaches it where to point. What if the food is strange but the method is trusted? Then disgust can be retrained. You can see that even now. One culture prizes blue cheese, another prizes fermented shark, another celebrates liver, blood sausage, tripe, fish sauce, or insects toasted until crisp. People do not merely tolerate these foods, they crave them, serve them proudly, and attach identity to them. So the mystery is not that ancient people ate gross foods. The mystery is why you think your own disgust is the final version. It is not. It is local. It is modern. It is shaped by abundance, sanitation, packaging, and distance from the raw materials of survival. Take away those conditions and your menu changes fast. Would your stomach really stay so selective if winter kept getting closer? There is another reason these foods mattered. They trained minds. To crack marrow from bone, recognize edible insects, judge the difference between useful fermentation and dangerous spoilage, and process bitter plants without dying required attention, memory, and social teaching. Food was not just fuel, it was a school for perception. A carcass was a puzzle, a shoreline was a catalog, a forest floor was data. Every disgusting thing held a question. Can this be eaten? Can it be transformed? Can it be stored? Can it be shared safely? The humans who got good at answering those questions did not simply survive, they expanded. Can you see how intelligence hides inside appetite? This is where Richard Wrangham's work on cooking becomes so important. Cooking did more than make food tastier. It softened fiber, unlocked calories, reduced chewing time, and changed the energy economics of being human. A species built increasingly around costly brains benefited from foods that delivered more usable energy with less effort. So ancient eating was never just about bravery, it was about extraction. How do you pull more nourishment from a hostile world? Sometimes by fire, sometimes by stone, sometimes by rot, sometimes by patience. Every ugly technique was a technology, and every technology widened the gap between what the environment offered and what humans could actually use. What if civilization began not with polite meals but with getting less squeamish? That idea sounds insulting. It is also revealing. Your species did not climb upward by refusing the nasty parts of reality. It climbed upward by learning how to handle them. The buried fish, the cracked marrow, the grub under bark, the organ that had to be eaten now, the bitter tuber that became edible only after work. These were not side notes, they were steps. Each one said the same thing. The world gives you more than you first think, if you can tolerate looking closely enough. That may be one of the oldest human lessons of all. So why does your stomach still turn? Because disgust protects you, but it also flatters you. It lets you feel distant from the raw struggle that built your body. It lets you imagine that your food preferences are refined truths instead of recent habits draped over ancient wiring. Yet the wiring is still there. You still crave salt, fat, sweetness, and energy density. You still overreact to bitterness, slime, smell, and contamination cues. You still carry a brain shaped by trade-offs forged long before kitchens became sterile and dinner became aesthetic. In other words, the ancient eater did not disappear. That eater became you. Only the environment changed. Can you feel the echo? The foods ancient people actually ate were often disgusting by modern standards. That part is true. They ate insects. They cracked bones for marrow. They prized organs. They fermented fish. They processed plants that fought back. They blurred the line between fresh and preserved in ways that now feel extreme. But the deeper truth is stranger. Those foods were not evidence of human failure. They were evidence of human genius under pressure. Disgust said no. Curiosity said maybe. Necessity said try. And culture remembered what worked. That is how a species survives long enough to become picky. That is how a gross meal becomes an evolutionary advantage. So the next time you wrinkle your nose at spoiled food, remember this. Your disgust may feel ancient, but your ability to reject that meal so confidently is the luxury. Your ancestors earned it by eating first,